We have 13 members on the room. If there's any question from anyone, please repeat.
Yeah.
Yep. That's on you. For you.
I got it.
Got it.
Pull the chats. All right.
You set?
All good.
All right, let's go. So we really appreciate you being here. As I was checking my calendar, checking everything out. First off, can you hear me online? Because I know that mic works.
Yeah, this one works.
We're going to have to trade back and forth.
You got to check. Yeah,
nice.
You're good.
All right, good. We're going with that. So I was checking the calendar and I did see that everybody that is here is foregoing tonight's Thursday night football. And we really, really do appreciate that. But I do believe we will wrap it up. So those that want to leave, because what's it? The Pats and the Jets? Is that a real game? All right. So fair enough. But you came out here tonight to learn a little bit about the essential role of AI, or the evolving role of AI and effective data governance. So my name is Benjamin Corral, or Ben Corral. I have the privilege of serving as one of the CISOs in residence for Zscaler. What that really means is I get to serve as a security evangelist, and I get to go around and talk about zero trust. I get to talk about security topics, and every now and then I get to stay home and do a presentation that's local. So I really appreciate that. And Eric?
Yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Eric Cabello. So just a little background on myself. So I'm based here out of Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been at Zscaler for about 6 years, a senior sales engineer. And then prior to that, I was actually escalation engineer at Zscaler. So I actually made the switch over to the sales side. And then prior to that, TAC engineer for 10 years in the United States Navy prior to that. But definitely nice meeting everyone. I'm looking forward to work with you guys.
Keep going.
Oh, so we can keep going.
We'll see. Yeah, maybe it will work. So our agenda for the evening is, first, we're going to talk about some of the fundamentals of actually having a data governance program. Then we're going to talk about the current state of security, or as I'm saying up there, the current state of insecurity. And then we will talk about AI in the hands of bad people. But alas, we will then talk about AI in the hands of the good people as well. So all is not lost. We're going to be talking about data. Data is everywhere. Data is synonymous. Everything is creating more and more data. So what are we doing with this data? What can help us get our mind wrapped around it? What can help us make some context out of all the data that is being created by every tool that we have in the world? And then if there are a lot of questions that are out there, then Eric may wow us with some of his technical prowess by doing an actual product demo as well. And then at the end, if you haven't asked all the questions and you haven't gotten every bit of information out of him, we will have a section where we will then go into a little bit more of a Q&A. Fair enough? That'll work. It's just going to be slow every time I hit to advance. Before we start, I do want to say some of the fundamentals of a security program. Yeah, a data governance. And it all starts with, do you have executive support? And by executive support, have they funded you? Have they given you staffing? Do they ask for KPIs or perhaps KRIs? Are they allowing you to come and to present in front of them? Is there a committee that is made up of at least one board member? If not, then you really do not have executive oversight or executive support, executive control, all of those things that are there. The next thing is, every organization's a little bit different. So your program will be different from my program. Sure, all of us are unicorns, I like it. But that's also because of some of the regulatory compliance that's out there. You've got GDPR, you've got CCPA from a privacy perspective. What's that going to mean for our program? What type, in the industry you're operating in, what type of data do you actually have? And then building it around that. So whether it's healthcare related, payment card information, and then there are going to be other regulations like that GDPR that's up there, as well as the AI acts and other ones that are coming out in the EU. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for our program? Do we need to make adjustments? All of that comes with the governance. Do you have privacy policies? And policies are not simple pieces of paper. I used to sit there and say, why do we need policy? Policy is just slowing us down. What policy is management's way of sharing their expectations with the organization, and they're writing it down and they're sharing it with you. Do you have policies, and do you enforce those policies as well? So when we get over on the operations with the auditing, reporting, and all of that, and then what type of agreements do you have in place? Do you have privacy impact assessments? Do you have data processor, DPAs, and all of those things in place? That's the governance section before we jump over onto the right of how do we actually do the operations? How do you do security? How do you do data governance? What does it look like? What tools do you have in place? And do you do monitoring? Do you do alerting? We've hired people. We've put them in these roles. We have all these tools. These tools are generating logs. They're generating alerts. Are you actually monitoring and doing anything with it? And if not, then you are failing your organization. Personal opinion, but you're failing your organization if you're not monitoring, if you're not alerting, and if you're not doing anything with it as well. So where are we as an industry today? Maybe. It's thinking, it's going. Today, as an industry globally, we are spending $219 billion. $219 billion spent globally on an annual basis is being spent on security. That's a really big number. That nice with the B. I didn't have that on any of the programs that I got to run, but really, it says we are spending a lot of money on security. Unfortunately, it still looks like the cyber criminals continue to outpace us. So no matter how much money we are spending, the number of successful cyber attacks continues to elude us. It continues to outpace us. Every year, we get to spend just a little bit more money on security as a whole. But for some reason, the cyber criminals continue to increase the number of attacks that are out there. So why is that? We'll look at some technology in just a minute, but really, are we spending? Are we not prioritizing? Do we not have the right people? Do the people not have the right skills? Do we not have the right policies with the right processes? Do we have people, process, and technology? Do we not have the right technologies that are there? Are we just misprioritizing things that are out there? Or there's also coming down to technology. I will say that when I started in technology 30 years ago, none of the three things that are on this screen now were in existence. There weren't mobile phones. There weren't even pagers yet. Much less being able to think about having the mobile phone that's in your pocket has more processing power than the first server that I deployed. I think my first server was a 286 with 4 mega RAM. And we thought that thing was smoking at the time. Now we got mobility, you've got IoT, industrial IoT, other OT devices that are out there, and then the adoption of cloud. Again, none of those things were in existence when we started rolling. When I started in this industry, in IT, much less when I shifted to focus just on cybersecurity in 1999, before it was even an industry. But oh, Aaron just called me old. Yeah, I mean, it's true. But yeah, oh, you were saying old, the network diagram that's up there. That's what you were talking about. Yes. That's what I'm going with. But that's the thing is, yes, old. I love that transition. Yeah. But really, if you look at the way that I have gone as the head of security, as the global CISO for multiple organizations. And I will say for the first 25 of my years, I built those programs, because I'm old, based on old technology, traditional network, traditional security, and perimeter-based security, protecting the network. All of my data was in central locations, so I could build walls around all of that. It's that whole hard exterior with the mushy insides. And why is that bad? How do we expect to protect all of our data that is no longer just sitting in one or two locations? How do we protect that data with yesteryear's technology? And that's the thing that we're running into. Yeah, the technology itself is a security risk. If we take a look at it, all of those devices, they are expensive, but they're also complex. And at the end of the day, they do deliver a poor user experience. That is why IT has been the bane of a lot of people's existence for many, many years. So why? And how, what else is there and how can we do better? But before we get to that, I still like statistics. Maybe? Security teams are and have always been under pressure. The average security team today has 11,000 security alerts. If we look at the number of tools that the average security team has, it's anywhere from 60 to 80 tools. Of those 60 to 80 tools, you're going to get around 11,000 daily security alerts. Somebody has to do something with that. Back to that regulatory, that overview. As I said, if you're not actioning on those, if you're not taking a look, you're failing your organization, because that's what we are there for. We are there to take a look at those alerts, but we also see on average, again, 32% of those 11,000 alerts are going to be false positives. Are we wasting our time? What do you think? Waste?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to sort through all that, to be honest. I mean, definitely when you have multiple point products and everything coming into one central, even if you pull them into a centralized location, it's still a lot of noise. So, I mean, we see that every single day, and that's actually one of the things that we always address or like to talk about when we're doing demos and things like that. So that's something we'll be able to show you as well, how we kind of mitigate that.
Love it. All right. Now, how quickly does a cyber criminal take advantage of a system? You put a vulnerable system on the internet, how quickly are they going to take advantage of it? Find you, exploit you, and own you. What do you think?
I mean, you generally want to do it as quick as possible, but I mean, you got ransomware and
Well,
things.
not you and I. How quickly are they going to find me and exploit me?
I'm pretty quick. If possible, if the attack surface is open, I mean, it'll take us a little bit of time. Just
30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 3 days?
I mean, constant.
Constant.
It's a constant stream.
Come on, man. Work with me here.
Yeah.
Give me time. Give me time.
We'll say 2 hours.
2 hours. What about 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
127 seconds. So I went out to Friendly Chat GBT and I asked them, in this day and age, 127 seconds was the fastest. When I asked what the average was, if you take a Windows 2003 server, you put Windows 2003 server unpatched on the internet, it takes about 15 minutes. Fastest observed was about 2 minutes, but the average is anywhere from 15 to 16 minutes. So no hours, moments do matter.
Seconds.
Absolutely. Seconds matter. I say moments, no longer minutes matter. Seconds, nanoseconds, all of those things, absolutely. The cyber criminals are faster than we are. And if we take a look at this, are we misprioritizing? Are we not spending the right time? Do we not have the right tools? Do we not have the right people with the right skills? You have all these new disruptive technologies that are coming out there. The cyber criminals are better at adopting the newer technologies than we are. Or are we rolling out technologies before we understand the technologies or before we know how to protect the technologies as well? I think that a lot of that is out there. And the next technology, that next mega wave of a disruptive technology that I think is still on the hype cycle right now is going to be Gen AI. So what is Gen AI?
Generative AI. So, I mean, obviously, I know.
It's the smart person, but no, generative AI. What is it? Generative AI is a wonderful thought, a wonderful technology. Generative AI, the things that it can potentially do. If we look at Gartner right now has generative AI at the peak of the hype cycle. So they have their hype cycle and then disillusionment and everything comes. Right now, generative AI is at the peak of the hype cycle. Whether it's actually going to be able to deliver on some of the things we're going to talk about on the second half of this presentation, we'll see. But it is a wonderful technology, but I think all of us in here will also say it's a dangerous technology. It's dangerous because not everybody understands the consequences of the actions that they're taking. If you go and take a look at Samsung is one where people are uploading source code, trying to do a QA. Help my source code, help me do all of these things if they're uploading their source code to the internet. And there's a dozen other ones that are out there of examples where somebody's trying to upload something to the cloud or to one of these LLMs that are out there for what they thought was simple reasons, easy reasons to get some help. but they're exposing data exposures, data leakage. So AI is a wonderful technology, a wonderful thought, but it's also very, very dangerous as well. What AI or what industries right now are starting to use AI? All of them, absolutely. But the top one that is out there right now is the manufacturing organization. My last role was the global CISO for a manufacturing organization. So I am not shocked whatsoever to see manufacturing outpacing the technology companies and the financial companies. Manufacturing produce, well, goods, but they produce a lot of data. And their margins are very, very small. So if they can take the data that they already have and gain more insights from it, and that's what AI does, that Eric didn't share with me. AI is able to take and look at large amounts of data. It's able to analyze those large amounts of data. It's able to start to find patterns on these large amounts of data. And then it's able to start giving you some insights. If it starts to give you some of those context around the data that it's able to find. And that is why manufacturing industries, manufacturing organizations are really looking at AI as well of what else can I do? How can I be more efficient? There's difference between the efficiency and the effectiveness. And the efficiency is the things that I'm doing, can I do it better? Can I do it faster? And if I can do it better, faster, then I'm doing it today. They save time, they save money. All of a sudden, those margins get a little bit better for them as well. So that's, again, one of the reasons for the manufacturing to be out there as well. And then it comes down to what tools are they actually utilizing. So ChatGPT, I don't think anybody is going to be shocked to see ChatGPT was the top. And then Drift. What's Drift? Anybody? Nobody's using Drift in here today? Then no one is in marketing in here. So yes. So Drift, Drift can help you with drafting. So you can get out there for a press release and you can sit there and it's going to help you to make you sound more intelligent, or, it'll wordsmith things for you as well. Will ChatGPT do that for you? Absolutely. But Drift is there for the marketing reasons. OpenAI writers, so more reasons like that. So yes, and I will say that, ChatGPT is helping my kids both in college right now. The papers they're submitting are probably a little bit better than they submitted previously to ChatGPT being in existence. All I'm saying is their GPA is higher right now than it was, and I don't know that they got smarter overnight or they got wiser by using the tools that are available to them as well. Question, yes, on the last slide. I'll pay attention. Yes, because OpenAI does have other tools other than ChatGPT. So yes, ChatGPT is written by OpenAI, but they do have a couple of additional tools and they have the different versions. This is ChatGPT version 4. So version 4? I think it's version 4. So, but because of the other versions and the other solutions they have, that is why it is broken out. Because I saw that when I looked at this as well. But that's also why I put that there at the bottom. So you can go in. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, that would make a lot of sense specifically.
Well,
so the question was, do you think manufacturing is at the top just because they may have less compliance standards versus anything around health, government, education, things like that? And I absolutely believe that, and I actually see that all the time in the day-to-day. Just what are the regulations that you're held to and the standards that you're held to, and how quickly can you actually implement something like that in your environment? And when you have lower risk within certain verticals of like manufacturing, I think that's probably the reason why you see that.
Yes.
You have one more question.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So the question was around OT. Like, so what type of data would you be looking at as far as OT? Mm-hmm. So you're looking as far as how you can put OT device data inside of AI and how you could potentially exploit that. Some could just be the visibility of the OT data and be able to identify what are trends in the environment as far as like, hey, maybe someone plugged in a certain type of OT device that may not necessarily exist there, where you can use AI to kind of map that out. And so as far as from implementing something like that, you could see like potential rogue devices that are OT devices on those networks.
Yep.
And so that's where we've seen some of that within the Zscaler space as far as OT classification.
Connect all of their equipment in to start internet. So
And-
areas where you have bad internet, so like midway,
Oh, did you want-
which is like the which is like the bread band, right? So
Yeah.
in those cases, you actually connect all of those devices to OT. Basically, you do predictive maintenance. You actually save a lot of money instead of sending your field engineers for those areas, because you have to send the field engineers to do maintenance, right? Now you do predictive maintenance. You let the farmers know that there is a potential issue, thereby reducing the time it takes to fix issues. So that is one more area where you can actually do predictive. So that was going to be my question, because you're saying that all of it use Gen AI. An accurate representation may be increasingly using AI, because Gen AI is just one part of it, right? So because you have predictive AI where you're going to do predictive analytics, which is basically what manufacturing mostly does.
Predictive maintenance is going to be out there as well. Of all of the trucks, fleet management is going to be out there. You got the machines that create your widgets and the maintenance that's on that. You can start taking into account in this type of in the summer with the humidity here. Do I need to increase my maintenance based on all of the data that's out there as well? So you can sit there and put these sensors on the devices that create the widgets for you, and then in the different climates, in the different geos, and you can start taking a look and say, how do I do predictive maintenance? Can I predict when this machine is going to shut down? Can I run it 24/7? When do I need to shut it down? For how long do I need to shut it down in this type of climate, in this environment? Do I have one maintenance technician that's better than everybody else? And one of the other things is when you start talking some of the HoloLenses as well, of you got somebody who can walk around with the HoloLens and they can be your smart hands. They may not be the most intelligent person, or they may not know everything, but they're at least a person who is there. So I'm starting to see the HoloLenses being used as well. So information is being fed in. The maintenance person gets that information. They now call out to their site contact because of the data that was there for the predictiveness, or predictive maintenance, and now they're proactively reaching out as well. So that's some of the other interesting things that are being picked up on as well. So yes, more coming.
No intention of being pedantic here, but really, is it Gen AI? Is what we are talking about Gen AI? Because I would argue that it is not. It is a version of AI. It is a version of automation. It is a version of intelligence. Is it Gen AI? Is it generating? Is it generative AI? Or is it something that is instructing or automating an existing ecosystem, or allowing you to do things that you haven't been able to do before on an ecosystem, thereby being an AI or automation in form, but not Gen AI?
All right,
Micro.
Yeah.
go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, so I think the Gen AI spot or particular piece is more around like like what I see with typically with like source coding, where you're kind of massaging the data. It's not actually building. So what it's taking is refining what you're putting in, and just more of, again, massaging it into a place where it's more effective. So that's what I'd be looking at as far as like for more of the Gen AI side. Now, as what you're talking about for everything else, it's actually just AI analytics, right? It's just presenting that back. So you're absolutely correct as far as that goes.
But that's the thing. When you're starting to come up with decisions, if you're actually starting to, when we get about 5 or 6 more slides, some of the actions that are going to be taken, can I look at the behaviors that people are doing, and can I adapt policy to that as well? The predictive maintenance, some of those things, I'm going to start arguing, because it's making decisions based on the information that it's read. That is where it starts to become intelligent. It's making decisions based on the information, analyzing that, adding additional context into it. Now you start asking some prompts. Now you start feeding information in based on that. It starts to get there.
I agree.
Or are we just getting better in programming and better and doing things like that as well? I'll accept that too. All right. What ways are attackers innovating with AI? What are you seeing?
Well, first of all, just kind of hitting on the compliance thing once again, is the fact when we're talking about being able to implement AI into our environment, and like why you'd see attackers use it first, they don't have any compliance that they have to abide by. They can just use whatever. They can use the latest technology as soon as it hits the market. And As far as ways that they're doing it, just ways to be able to do like port sniffing mapping for anything that they're using as far
Love
as
it.
attack surface. So just being able to do domain lookups. What are your subdomains? What are things that like where can they get in? So anywhere you can look for as far as infiltration paths, and then what's the optimal codes that you can use when you implement something? Are there ways that it can analyze to say, you know what, these are things that will be caught versus what won't be caught. So like it's a way to really refine the attack once it's in. So that's typically what I see and what things that we look at to prevent.
Love it. Love it. Absolutely. And attackers are adopting technology. They are starting to use some of these. And reconnaissance with ChatGPT is becoming even easier. What it used to take me time to go out there and to research, it would take me at least hours. But now I can go out to something like ChatGPT and I can ask you, show me the top VPN vulnerabilities, that have been discovered over the last 5 years. And within seconds, I have a list. I have the list of the vulnerabilities, tells me the company, Fortinet, Citrix, Pulse that's out there, and the CVEs. Now I can create the next question of using a site like Shodan, give me a list of all sites that have this CVE. Or I can go and say, the next question I'm going to ask is, which of these CVEs, and I'm going to cut paste here, have active exploit code? Now I'm going to go to Shodan, or I'm going to ask it to use Shodan or reference something like the Shodan and say, which sites, which IPs, which anything have these vulnerabilities that are out there as well. Doing the reconnaissance using the ChatGPT, using the AIs or LLMs, I guess I'll use the proper, using the LLM that's out there. Now you can sit there and say ChatGPT has got safeguards on it. It's not going to be out there, but there are LLMs out there that have had those safeguards removed as well. So reconnaissance becomes a lot easier. And then the next one comes with social engineering. And this one I don't think is going to be a shock to anybody, but AI generated with these phishing messages that are coming out there of I can create a very realistic looking message. And it took me 7 ChatGPT prompts or queries in order to generate a realistic looking Microsoft-esque login page for an organization. And I removed the logo of the organization as well, but no longer. For so long with my security awareness training, that's not my phone, I promise. For the security awareness training, I would have the 10 signs of this is how you know it's going to be a fake email. It's going to have very poor English. It's going to come from this. It's going to make different references. These are becoming harder and harder now to discern. If it's becoming harder for my security team to discern and my IT to discern, then the rest of the colleagues, the rest of our coworkers that aren't technologists are going to have a really hard time understanding how to discern whether it's legit or not. And we have another question, so I'm going to pause for a moment.
Hey, thank you. So the question is kind of tied to what you just had up with the vulnerabilities, right? And one of the things that I think a lot of organizations are struggling with right now is the ability to put guardrails around AI so that they don't let their own sensitive data get outside of the environment, right? So I know that there's a history with Zscaler and data loss prevention. Yeah, I'm kind of curious, and I don't, maybe this is later on in the presentation, but that's something I'm very curious about learning about is how are you guys structured to put the guardrails in place to ensure sensitive data doesn't get leaked? Because that's ultimately a hacker's goal at the end of the day is to exfiltrate your, sensitive data. So
Yep.
Would love to hear a little bit about that.
See, that's why I brought somebody smarter than I.
Yeah, I can answer that one.
We'll cover that.
All right. So there's a few different ways that we got to look at the ChatGPT. Like when you're looking at tools, as far as are you using open tools on the open internet, such as like ChatGPT, or using like generative AI tools that you have sanctioned within your organization. So if we're looking at the main goal here is we want to understand what people are posting in those prompts and is it sensitive information. And so the first thing that we do at Zscaler is first, if you're just going into a monitor mode because you don't want to be disruptive to the space, we can first just create DLP rules in our side where it'll just generate alerts, where it'll just show you the questions that they're asking and what the outputs are. So that's the first thing. Just gather information so that you can make a business decision moving forward without impacting the users. The second thing we could also do is if you have internally hosted GPT or generative AI applications, you can say, you know what, we're going to allow our sanctioned SaaS apps or sanctioned generative AI apps. And then anything outside of that, just do a caution page or block the users from posting there. So you can actually control even like the HTTP request method. So say no posts going to these specific sites or there. Or if you don't want to be disruptive at all, but you still want to allow the users to use things such as generative or the chat GPT, at that point, when you go to those certain URL categories or applications, then you can just isolate the instance. And so what we would do inside of our cloud is we would open up a Chromium browser and then stream down the pixels via HTML5, but also give the administrators control to say, you know what, maybe these users are not allowed to copy paste from their local endpoint into the browser. So they're not posting source code out. And the only way that they would actually do that is if they'd actually type it up, which would, I mean, that's falls back into the control channel there. So if you want to block them directly, you can still block the site itself. So there's definitely multiple avenues in order to address that. It just depends on what stage your organization's at as far as how you want to do it. Are you gathering information? Are you doing caution? Are you doing blocking? Or are we just isolating it down to just one specific application or a few apps? Awesome.
Nice. Next one. What else are we seeing out there? Oh, only click once. Deepfakes. Yes, Jay Chaudhry. So, yeah, and deepfakes. You know, can you believe what you're hearing? Or can you believe what you're seeing? And we are starting to hear, see, and experience more of these deepfakes. We're in an election year. It's going to be interesting to see what else starts coming with these deepfakes as well. But whether you believe the $25 million was being lost by a Zoom session by a finance person who released several purchase orders or not, whether that was fake news or real news of releasing that information. But you start to get phone calls, and it's that person's voice. You know the person. This is that thing of you get an email, you pick up a phone and you call that person. Well, in this case, you're getting that voicemail that's coming in that says, hey, it's me. I need you to do something for me. So this was our CEO. So this is Jay Chaudhry, the president, CEO, co-founder of Zscaler. And came in of, this is Jay. I need you to do something for me. I'm away from my normal devices. Please go ahead. And this one was very easy to discern or understand because then they asked the person to go buy gift cards. Jay Chaudhry's not going to call and ask for a gift card. So that one was easy to discern, but it was his voice. And he's been out there enough. He's done enough talk. He's been on enough, on TV enough that his voice was out there. But there are these solutions that are out there that are able to take the voice, manipulate it, and create different types of attacks that are out there. Anything else that you've seen?
Spot on. Yeah.
Wow, I like being right for once. Yeah, like I said, there are LLMs that are out there. So you got ChatGPT. You start asking questions to ChatGPT. Eventually, ChatGPT is going to tell you that it cannot help you. There are LLMs that have had those safeguards removed. So Rogue GPT is going to be one of them. You've got Poison GPT. You've got Worm GPT. There are these LLMs that exist today that you can go and you can play with. You can give it to your red team, to your purple team, and you can start making use of them of how would this work inside your organization, but using Rogue GPT, with rudimentary prompts, because prompts do matter, what you ask, how you ask, in what order you ask, all of those things. But with rudimentary prompts, you can build and execute a multi-stage attack against your organization as well. But alas, all is not lost, because the defenders, the good people, the good guys, the good gals, the defenders or guardians of our galaxies, but defenders get to start utilizing AI as well. And now everything you were just talking about, well, this slide and the next slide, but all comes down to your data. Where is your data? Understanding what data you have, where that data is, do you have visibility, and is it sensitive? Based on the type of data, based on the regulations, based on the compliance for your organization. Are you a healthcare related? Do you have EPHI data? So is it sensitive? Is it also sensitive? Is this my source code? Is this the crown jewels that I have? What makes me unique? That if I lost this would be irreplaceable, irreparable. It would do untold damage to our organization, is also going to be sensitive data. And if so, can we classify this? And what do we classify it as? Are we going to rely on a person to classify it? And are we going to allow a person to change the data classification? If I know that it's sensitive information, but I can change the classification public, and now I can send it to my own Gmail address as well. Different policies that are out there. So classification, who can access it? So authorizations of who can access it and what type of access do we give them? Do we give them modified? Do we allow them to download? Do I allow them to download it no matter what? That consistent policy enforcement. That next one of, if I'm on my corporate device, can I download data? But if I'm on a BYOD device, my personal device, perhaps I can only read the data, but I can't download it as well. But can I consistently enforce this no matter, from an identity, no matter what location I'm coming from, no matter what system I'm coming from, no matter where I'm at in the world as well? Can I consistently enforce that as well? And then we have the life cycle management of data. Data has a life. Where it's created? Who's allowed to edit it? Who's allowed to share it, print it, download it? Who's allowed to store it, and on what devices are you allowed to store it? And then at the end of who's allowed to delete it. If that data owner, the creator of that data, is the creator, the author of it, is that person the data owner? And if that person leaves the organization, who's the new data owner? There is a life cycle of data that is out there, but we also need to protect that data in all states, all 3 states, not just 2 states. So you have data at rest and data in motion. That's pretty standard, but it's also data in use. How do I protect the data while it's being used? It's no longer encrypted. They want it encrypted while it's at rest. I want it encrypted, going over encrypted tunnels when it's in motion, but we also need to protect that data while it's in use. Can somebody save it? Can they store it? Can they print it? Can they forward it? What can they do with that data? And with the prompt injection, we'll be talking about in another slide or 3 as well. So in all 3 of those states as well. And then what type of data are we talking about, structured or unstructured? Whether it's sitting here with a nice presentation that, everybody can get access to this presentation if they want it. But structured versus unstructured, what's in your data warehouse? I like to say that the only thing today that is more distributed than the users that we have is the data that they hold. Our data is everywhere, which is why old controls no longer work, because our data doesn't sit in one data center. Our data doesn't sit inside the walls of any one building. Our data sits. We've got public cloud, you've got private cloud, you've got SaaS applications. You have so many different devices. You have personal devices where some of your users who are working from home probably have a USB device, whether it's thumb drive, whether it's an external Western Digital device that they've saved corporate data to as well. So how do we remove their access when they're no longer an authorized user? How do we expire access to that data? How do we remove it? Is it encrypted? How do they get access to that, but they're no longer authorized and they have copies of our data? How do you protect it? And how do you inventory it? How do you know where it's at? As I said, the only thing more distributed than our users is the data that they have created. Other obstacles that impact data security. Far too many teams that are doing different things. Nobody knows what anybody else is working on. I'm not going to share information with that team because that's my responsibility. So large teams, silo teams, where's my data? Where's my data going? Lots of regex rules. So you can start talking about some of the policies that Eric was talking about earlier as well. I've created all these rules of maintaining the policies of when is the last time a rule was actually executed. Or I have a block rule that's rule number 15, but rule number 5 is an accept, therefore 15 will never be taken into account. How do I find that out? How do I know that rule number 15 has never been fired or executed? And if I go inside the logs and I start looking and they're saying, well, rule number 15, I see no logs to show that it's ever been in effect. How do I know that it was rule number 5 that was overriding it with an allow? So rule number 15 of block was never out there. How do you maintain those policies? How do you get the context of all of the things that are out there? How do you learn about all of these things as well? So you can spend a lot of time doing the analysis as a human, or you start using some technology to support us as well. But the problem keeps getting worse here, because what type of data is out there? Now we get the geekiness. Now we get to, what type of data is out there? And it's magic when we start trying to put it all together. It's like trying to read the tea leaves that is out there. All this data that is there, different types of data. And when I started deploying SIMs back 15 years ago, it's give me all your data, send all your data into my SIM so that I have access to all the data. I can make decisions based on all of this. But what we quickly realized in the SIM world, centralized log management, whatever you want to call it, was every manufacturer and every product structured the data differently. The headers were different. They called it something different, which is why we had CIF coming out, common event format, things like that, CIF2, all of those things. So everything was creating data, and all of the data was different. So then how did we bring it all together? Magic, maybe, paint, there we go. So how do we get a holistic view of the data? How do we bring it all together, and what technologies are going to help us? How do I get a holistic view of things inside our environment? And that is where we start talking about changes in technology. Reimagining network and security. And this is why I brought somebody smarter than me who can actually start talking about being on a zero trust journey. No longer are we going to connect people to our networks. Any to any zero trust communication using policies now instead of networks. I want to stop connecting people to networks. I want to connect identities to resources. I don't want to allow a third-party vendor to connect to my network to access one application. In my last role, I would say when we did analysis, looked at all of our data, all of the potential ransomware, all of the malware infections, or the lion's share of them, we were finding was from when a vendor from an unmanaged, unknown, untrusted device was using VPN to connect to our network, and then that device that connected for a short period of time while they did that one connected to the one application or RDP'd into the one system is what was infected, and it was attempting to spread. So stop connecting unknown, untrusted devices to your network when it doesn't need to be connected to a network. And that's what we're talking about with a zero trust journey. When you start a zero trust, as you're on that journey of a zero trust, internet, no longer do we need these dedicated internet MPLS, expensive connections. Internet can absolutely replace. And people used to balk at the statement of internet can replace your internal network or your private networks. But then when COVID happened and everybody went working from home, all of a sudden, yes, apparently we can use the internet. And then whether you're using traditional VPNs or other secure remote access, I think we've proven that internet can replace private networks. Every branch, I love this. Just because you're on the same network does not mean you have the rights to talk to any other system that's on there. The Starbucks model, everybody's a /32. You get to talk to your gateway, and that's all you get to talk to. Treat every branch like Starbucks. Just because you're in the same location does not mean your device should be trusted, should not be able to beacon out and talk to everybody else. And then start removing the attack surface. Everything is invisible, and no public IPs. Or very few public IPs. There's going to be DNS entries, things like that. It's not going to say nothing at any point, but zero trust. I don't trust you simply because of your identity. I don't trust you simply because of your machine. I don't trust you because you're sitting in this, in this area with us right now. Every session is going to have to be re-authenticated. Every time you're going to have to prove you are who you are. You still are who you are, but all of these is to bring us these three things at the end of the day. You're going to be more secure, you're going to simplify your technology, and transform. And all of this ends up being a mindset shift as well, because no longer are we talking networks. And again, I've been doing networking for a few decades at this point. So it's not easy when we're sitting here saying, but we've always done it this way. Starting to do it different ways, is a little bit scary as well. Anything else You want to add on that last slide? Because
No, I think that was spot on as well. So
all right, now shifting to actually talk about some data. Yeah, what everybody came to actually hear about. Unified data protection across these 5 key areas. Secure data in motion. What's in your, internet traffic? What's in your email? The other thing, secure your SaaS data, everything that's going to Salesforce, ServiceNow, things like that. How do we protect data that's heading there? How do I protect it in the cloud? How do I protect it in Azure, in AWS, GCP, IBM, everywhere, Oracle, that it's out there as well. Secure your endpoint data. What's sitting on my drive right now? How do I know that it's protected? When do I expire access? Am I allowing people to save it on their local hard drives? Do I have them save it on a cloud network? Instead of allowing it to save it onto your local drive, do you put it onto OneDrive? Do you put it onto Google Drive? Do you allow people to store it there? Secure BYOD. Am I even allowing you to use BYOD devices? Do I give you access? But if you're coming from your personal device, instead of allowing you to download things to your personal device, do I force you to a browser like Eric was talking about earlier, where I can even isolate it even more? But do I restrict you to a browser so that I can give you access to the data? I can empower, I can enable the business. I'm not hindering the business, but I'm still protecting the data and protecting the business as a whole. So there are ways of protecting all of those things. And I love that they're at the top of AI-powered data discovery, finding the data in all the different locations, and then looking at the type of data it is and doing intelligent classification as well, and multiple classification. So you can create policies that will sit there and label and classify to the highest degree. So if you find PII data, great, I can list it as PII, but now you find healthcare related. Do you want to now label that as PHI instead of simply PII? Will it change your protections? Will it change anything that is there? Or do you label it with both? Again, AI-powered, intelligent there, so that you don't simply rely on a person to make a decision, because the person's likely to fail to classify it as well. Integrated data protection, no matter where it's coming from, no matter where it's going to. I think we've already covered this one as well. So keep moving on. AI modeling, crucial. The key word here is going to be contextualizing the large amounts or the volume of data. This is why we are now going to start using technology. What a human can go through, the patterns that a person, and yes, I get it. Today, human intuition still trumps the generative AI, but AI is going to be more consistent than a person is going to be. So when we're talking about security operations, when we start talking about AI powered with a SOAR, I'm still going to say that I love the level 1, level 2, and things like that for AI powering the SOARs, but it's still not going to replace human intuition. But if it can do the bulk of the work and it can bring the intelligence to a person with the large volumes of data, the 11,000 alerts per day, how do I close out these false positives? How do we get through these larger amounts of data? Yeah, data fabric. I'm going to speed through this one. Connect, analyze, act. That's what AI does for us. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I got it, but repeat it.
yeah, so the question was if generative AI still has roughly a 20% error rate with where it currently is today.
Yeah. So taking a look, I'll give you the Zscaler answer because I talk to our Threat Labs individuals on a routine basis as well. And nowhere near the amount of improvement have we seen from the hallucinations at 20%. Maybe it's around a 15 now. How are we removing bias? How are we removing hallucinations? How are we taking a look at some of the prompts that are in there of when you go and say, give me the top 5? And if the LLM only knows of 3, it's going to make up the other 2 because you asked for 5. So it's not just going to say, well, there are only 3. So how do we train the models of if you only have 3, you respond with the 3? It nowhere near as robust as it needs to be. I'm still seeing around that same type. It's the high teens, you know, maybe they've got it down to that 15, 16, but we're still seeing it around that 20%. Yes.
Just a quick question out of curiosity. In your previous slide, you had those 5 points of data protection.
Yep.
The point number 1 was data in motion. The other 4 that you had, like data in SaaS platform, data in cloud, are you talking about data at rest? If so, do you have ways of scanning those environments, or how do you have visibility if it is data at rest?
Yeah, so I can answer that. So actually, I probably should have jumped in on that one. So what you see here is a centralized policy engine. So we do have all of our DLP dictionaries and engines and everything built within the policy engine in the Zscaler Exchange. So as you see, any of the devices that are moving data in motion, so that's the given. Like we just scan that, we do SSL inspection at scale, and we scan for that data. Now, when we're talking about SaaS and IaaS and things where the private cloud, what we're talking about is API link-ins directly into those. So you essentially provide administrative credentials to the Zscaler cloud so that we can, or just read credentials so we can scan the data itself. And then the same policy engines that you're applying for data in motion is now being applied to all of your data at rest inside of those file repositories. And there's actually more to it than just the DLP side of it, because since we're already scanning the information, we have a full security stack with malware protection, advanced threat protection, and sandboxing as well. And so what we'd want to do there is also make sure that there's no ransomware or anything else that's sitting in there. So the initial thought is, yes, scan for DLP, but also ensure that there's nothing malicious that's also sitting inside of those data at rest. As far as the applications, some of the most popular that we do direct integrations with when we're doing day 1 testing would be like Office 365, Google Suite, Workday, Salesforce, anything like that. And then for the IaaS, we can do S3 buckets. We can do anything inside like the Azure cloud, AWS, GCP, Oracle cloud as well, OCI. So we do scans on the file. We can scan the files themselves. So I think it's important to also recognize how we do the scan. So we create the API, and so whenever the file, you have 2 options. You can do data that's been stored for a long time, or you can do everything that's been that's correct. Yeah. So from this point moving forward, and so if you're modifying those files, then at that point we would create a copy within the Zscaler cache within the cloud, and then we would scan for the data structure and before as the save is happening. So it'd be fingerprint. So it's all hashed. So one thing to mention inside of our cloud, whenever we do any type of scan, so all of our scans are done within cache. So we don't store any sensitive information in the cloud. Even when the DLP policies trigger, we're scanning and we're presenting an MD5 hash. We're not actually taking the actual data and presenting it out. However, on the alerting side, if you want an incident receiver, at that point, we can offload the data into either an on-premise database or file repository, or if you want to store it within like Azure or any other location, we have a specific virtual machine for that. In which that case, you could use our console to pull that information back to preview it during the time of like remediation or when you're doing like your workflows. But as far as sensitive information being stored within the cloud, we never actually store anything on our side. And one thing, and you can actually look this up. This really cool is that's one of the compliance things where we're actually FedRAMP High certified because of the way that we handle sensitive information in that data structure. Oh, absolutely. No,
So one last question out of like clear the confusion here. Classification and discovery, obviously foundation behind any kind of data protection. Where you're trading here, and this is the first time I'm actually hearing this side of Zscaler, so pardon my ignorance. When you're scanning it, are you scanning the policies based on data loss prevention or data security posture management? Because very different granularity when we talk about it. Maybe DLP is easier and posture management is even more granular. So I just want to understand from which point of view are you scanning the data from?
Yeah, so that's a really good question as well. So when we're talking about DLP, we're talking about policies on whether or not you can share or whether you can exchange the data, right? Or whether you're modifying or whether it can be stored within a specific location. Data classification is a completely separate piece as well. So we do have data classification, and after this, I can actually pull up the console and show you like the way that we classify data in motion. So that would be using like machine learning AI to classify things such as like resumes or tax documents and things, or health documents moving through the cloud. So for data in motion. But one of the new things that we've actually built from the ground up, because we were actually looking at DSPM a few years back, as far as like, hey, this is going to be extremely important, and we need to have a way to be able to classify data at rest inside of those cloud cloud locations. So Zscaler, we actually do have a DSPM product for scanning and classifying information within Azure and AWS. I want to double check on the GCP side. I don't want to overcommit and say that that's something that we have right now. But we definitely understand that it's extremely important to have the DSPM product, and that's something that we built from the ground up. So email for data in motion. So we have essentially like a reverse proxy for the email side. And then for the data at rest, we do the API integration so we could scan the data at rest. So twofold there, but no inbound email in that sense. Yeah, so the API would do the scan into like Exchange. So that's data at rest that sits there. So we'd be scanning for DLP and also any type of malicious content. And then we'd have essentially the reverse proxy set up to do deep email for data in motion. Yeah. Oh yeah, we're FedRAMP cloud. So he's asking if we're FedRAMP certified. Yeah, we are FedRAMP High certified. So we do have a cloud, FedRAMP cloud, and so that would be direct integrations. For instance, if you have like CrowdStrike Fed, or if you have like Fed Cloud and AWS or Azure, we have direct peering with that on a FedRAMP High cloud. Yeah, so he's asking if the FedRAMP is across all clouds or one cloud. So one thing to take note of is we are a multi-tenant cloud architecture. So we've essentially got 5 clouds for what we would call just standard public clouds. And so that would be anybody who's not required for FedRAMP High certified. And then we've got Gov Cloud. So it's a whole separate entity in its own compliance. However, there's definitely a lot of compliance. So if you go to like zscaler.com/compliance, you'll see all of our compliance certs, and you can also request any of those.
We have a slide on that too.
Oh, there you go.
All right. Keep going.
I'll just say once I start, it's hard for me to stop
No.
talking. So
Well, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
You give you a mic, you give me a mic, we just keep talking.
Yeah.
No, the other thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to give context. And my background's in vulnerability management. So when I start giving examples, I go to vulnerability management far too often. But when it comes to prioritization, context is king, and that's what we're trying to get at as well, with the AI starting to add context out there as well. So you scan your environment, you run a Nessus scan, Nessus scan. I've been running Nessus for 30 years, but it doesn't really matter what vendor you use, or what tool you use. But it comes out with the CVE. So you have 2 machines that have the same CVE, and it has a score of 8.5. So now you can sit here and say, which one am I going to patch first? I'm one person. I can only do one thing at a time. Prioritization, app is not visible to the internet. And if you do start scanning for it, or you start looking, it's going to trigger a honeypot. So am I going to prioritize this one? Because with the CVSS score of 8.5, likely, my policy is going to tell me I have 15 days to fix this. But if I have this additional context, maybe I'm going to slow it down and start looking to say, what else am I going to prioritize? But the second system is reachable from the internet. That alone is probably going to allow me to prioritize that one. But not only is it reachable from the internet, it's got regulated customer data on it. Why I have a system with regulated customer data that's reachable from the internet, I'm not sure about, but for some reason it's out there, and I'm seeing anomalous traffic that's going to it. So now that I'm starting to add context, I can sit there and prioritize one system over the other. That's what we're trying to do at scale now, utilizing some of this generative AI.
One thing before with like the CV scans and everything else that we have, one of the things that I would also like to call out is the Avalor. We acquired a company called Avalor. So for the UVM, vulnerability risk management and prioritization, now we've got a specific console for that. And so the idea is that if Zscaler is directly in line with all of that traffic going out to the internet, or we're doing the API integrations into your sanctioned SaaS applications, why not provide a platform where we could see attack surfaces and where data exfiltration could potentially occur, and then prioritize that based off of the policies that you built. So with this, we've actually got a console specifically for presenting back risk management, and then also the ability for you to customize that data to prioritize that. So instead of having to manage spreadsheets and things like that for the UVM side.
Very
Yeah,
excited about
so
that. Love that.
extremely, yeah, it's really cool.
5 tactics, yes, quickly. So how do you move in?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
So for example, if this CV is related to say operating system, and on that operating system, you have several applications, database maybe installed on that, how does your application will determine that it has customer regulated data? You know, how does it determine? Is it some, or do you have to manually configure it, or it scans the entire system and then tags it in a certain manner? How does it do it?
Short answer is yes. I mean, it could be in a CMDB, it could be marked something. You could have inventory management. There are many ways of discerning, what is on there. So maybe it's integrated with Axonius. Inside Axonius, I could have a check mark that this has got regulated data. That's part of it as well. I could have a different CMDB. I could have a be using the ServiceNow component that allows me. So
still relying on some another system to give that intelligence that whether it has a regulated data or not, right? Is that the correct understanding?
today, yes, it is not
Yeah.
going to go and it is not going to scan the type of data that's there and then classify it and say based on this. So
Okay.
right now it is relying on another system to answer that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
So the question was, is the policy engine for our DLP based on the ALMs or so machine learning? So there's actually quite a few different things that we have. So number one, we would have DLP dictionaries and engines, which are predefined. And that goes to the level of saying even like if your social security number, regex expression for that, or you could go to higher confidence scores where you have the prefixes. So I think that's pretty standard across the board. The second DLP engines that we'd have EDM, IDM, so exact data match. Again, we'd hash the files on a logger and then send it up to the cloud, so we'd only identify in the hash. And you could do document index matching. So if you want to watermark documents or tag documents, we could also ingest MIB labels for that. And then, yeah, some of the other stuff like the source coding and things like that may rely a little bit more on the AI side, although just to mitigate some of the false positives. But so for the CVE data, yeah, so I'd have to double check as far as exactly. I know we have like a bunch of as far as the scans go, but I'd have to double check specifically around that. I'm sure there's definitely some involvement there.
Just a general question, since we talked a lot about Gen AI or generative AI, so I can understand machine learning and AI in context of predictive analytics. But in terms of Gen AI, which is predominantly used for, or LLM models, predominantly used to create content,
Yes.
mainly like there can be something write up or a summarization and stuff like that, right? But you mentioned several times Gen AI. So are you using it? And I'm just giving another point that Gen AI or LLM models, including ChatGPT, was not able to count number of hours in a strawberry word. So if you say how many hours, it will say 1 or 2 instead of 3. So that means we cannot really rely, even it is generating content for millions of people right now, right? And systems like security or products like these, how much reliance you should have to ensure that even that one missing piece will break the whole system. So how do you take care of that?
So you're talking about just Gen AI within the environment and leveraging that. So it really comes down to like control mechanisms that you're using as well. So do you want your users to be able to use certain like open AI or SaaS based generative AI applications? In most cases, we actually restrict that out. Because the first thing you saw when ChatGPT came extremely popular is people would massage their source code, and then the next thing you know, you have PI out there. So it's not necessarily the fact that we're looking at the actual data itself inside of it. It's just that the control mechanisms or the exfiltration paths in which it could incur. and ways that we can mitigate that. And so I think that's the first thing that we look at when we're talking about generative AI is you can't paste that source code to the generative AI. However, if there's ones that's specifically sanctioned or something internal that you can use, now you can redirect the users over to that to ensure that sensitive information is not leaking out. Does that kind of answer the question, or is no, it's actually it's actually easier because you think about it, Gen AI is more of an overlay. So it's like if you're using anything based on the internet, we're already a full secure web gateway on the outbound. And so we've got data classification. So anything generative AI, newly registered domains, miscellaneous unknown.
Thinking we had a slide.
Yeah. So exact same thing is we can build URL categories and you're catching all of this information as the traffic's going through the cloud. We don't care that it's Gen AI other than the fact that, hey, this is a tag here. We've got a policy to say, hey, you're not allowed to upload data to these specific sites. Or if you do want to allow users to do that, maybe you want to put them in an isolation instance and maybe record the session to ensure, hey, if we got to go back for like auditing or compliance reasons, now we can actually take a look at that and we've got the information there. Yeah, absolutely.
Is your plan just to be just a forward proxy, or are you planning to do something like a LLM firewall with proxying the reverse responses from your AI models as well? Is that something that you're thinking about?
Yeah, no forward-looking statements.
Yeah, so that I don't have. Yeah, I don't have the answer specifically for that. I know as of right now, if we can control the exfiltration paths, then I think that's a big portion of it. And if we can get them to use the internal generative AI tools, that generally mitigates the risk. However, one thing I will say is if you're curious as far as like what users are asking and those types of responses, we do have some of that information. You can actually set up alerts specifically on mostly the post requests on that. You're talking about the response. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you were already talking on this one, being granular access of blocking, allowing versus also isolating or cautioning as well. So you can sit there and have that granular and say, we do trust Copilot. We're going to allow that one, and you can block the suspicious or malicious ones that that are out there, but you can also do a caution. So you already covered this one. I think the next one as well.
I have one question. If you go back to the previous slide, you mentioned Copilot, right? So can you actually do a caution and isolate just the traffic that actually happens for Copilot, not just for a web client, but also for the native client?
So yeah, you're talking about the thick client itself. So all of this, I know is specifically around like the web-based traffic.
Well,
but
the question was,
yeah. So so the question was, can we actually caution on the thick client versus actually just the web client? Sorry, I was getting way ahead of myself there. So I would have to double check. So just knowing how Zscaler works on the back end, in order to caution anything on a thick client, we'd actually have to have a post notification via a toast message. So it's really easy to do it on the web because you can do a redirect. You're just like, okay, yeah, I see this. Redirect the user, they get a caution page. For the ChatGPT, as far or even it doesn't matter which application, just if it's a thick client itself, I would want to double check. But if you want, I can definitely get the answer for you on that. But it would have to be done via toast notification.
Correct.
Exactly. So it would hit. My concern is it would hit the caution page and they wouldn't get the prompt to say. So essentially, it wouldn't have given the chance to acknowledge it, which means it would just be a dead connection at the end of the day. But I mean, that's also a way that you could redirect the user to say, hey, you don't use the thick client. You can, if you're going to use the web client, then at that point we can enforce the isolation. So it just really comes down to what's the desired user behavior that we're going to look at.
I think we've already covered all of these as well of, what's being uploaded. You already answered all of that. To wrap it up. Last slide. I said you got this, but no. Effective data governance. You have to have ubiquitous visibility. We need to see access to all. And the question that I actually got posed to me yesterday was, does generative AI and the principles with how voracious of an appetite that Gen AI and LLMs have to get access to more data, does Gen AI principles violate the principles of zero trust? What do you think? AI modeling, yeah. AI modeling will contextualize data. It'll look at policy. I'm really excited about how it can learn some of that ML with the AI, how it will then be able to create policies on the fly based on what it has seen, what it's learned. This policy hasn't been used in the last 12 months. We're going to retire that policy. Or looking at these typical finance analyst roles, when they can start removing. The whole premise of zero trust is only given access the least, principal least privilege of only having the access that one needs for that request or that action. So contextualizing the relationships, the policies can be created and or applied. AI, I like to say when I'm teaching my SANS courses that executives are used to making decisions with very little information. So AI will greatly speed up the decisions to help give us the right information to make better decisions faster and with knowledge. So faster detections, faster analysis. I like all of the things that are there, but putting the right guardrails out there. So that's what AI is hopefully going to help us to have better guardrails, to put guardrails on things that we haven't had before, to give us insights that we haven't had before as well. That's it. That's all I got. But we also need time. So I threw that if Run were built in a day, then we would have hired their contractor. We would have brought them in. We would have done all of these things faster. So AI right now is still at the top. We're starting to see really good uses of it, whether we believe it's AI, whether it's that machine learning, whether we're just getting better with some of our detections, whether we're making better use of the data, and whether it's actually being generative yet, whether it's actually being intelligent yet, whether it's AI that's actually generating some of the data itself. So as it starts creating the reports, as it starts creating these, AI data being generated by AI, then who is the data owner? If I take AI and I start analyzing Eric's data, and now I create a report based on it, visibility, transparency, and all of that, is it still Eric's data? Because now it's my report that my AI, there's a lot of things from a legal perspective that still haven't been answered as well.
Oh, another question.
Oh. But I don't know how much time we have for a demo of this.
Hi. In the cloud security, you have like deployment models and service models. So a customer organization will have a combination of these things, particular deployment model, particular service model. So based on that, you have, from the attacker point of view and defender point of view, there is some attack entry points. So AI can be used for security and data governance at various models. So did Zscaler looked at this combination of things? Of course, you guys can say, hey, it's a zero trust, but still the effort you put in to defend will be different. And at the same time, attacker might look at weaknesses of this particular service model or deployment model. Any take on that?
I still don't think I'm following you exactly.
Oh, in other words, where can the efforts put in to use the AI in terms of the data governance and security protection in terms of these deployment and service models?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Again, what does AI do today? AI is able to look at large amounts of data. It's able to start finding pattern. It's able to start applying some logic to it. It's able to, again, contextualize, and this is where it starts creating things. So it's taking that unstructured data, and as it starts contextualizing, creating a little bit of more structured as well. So where do you have use cases there? Where do you have problems there? So in short, I don't have a simple answer. There's not an easy button. I don't have that Staples easy button that we can just press. But the short answer just comes down to the different, where's your data today? What are the problems? How do we get access to that data? does it exist today? And what are we trying to do? What is that use case that is there? And then how can we make the best use of the existing technology to give us more insights to it? You know, to have more protections there. Again, what's the risk that we're trying to mitigate? And do we have enough data to give us?
Difficult for an attacker to use AI at the ES level, infrastructure as service level, than SaaS level.
Or is it easier? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, for an attacker to sit there, what can I learn? What can I discern? If they start sending a few packets, getting the responses that are coming back of, you know, now they're learning, the attacker's learning. And if an attacker can start sending a few packets to see how it's being treated, you know, the TCP walk of able to send things, would it go through the firewall or what ports are going to be sent through a firewall? Now you can use AI to analyze some of the bits that are coming back in order to do the reconnaissance for a person, and then it all comes back. So yeah, that can even make an attacker even more efficient. So yes, a lot of things like that.
Any other questions?
That's
Good.
And I did fail to put Eric's LinkedIn up there because he answered all of the questions.
Thanks, Ben and Eric, for this.
Absolutely. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it.
There's more drinks, there's more food. Yes.
So I'm sure you are tired.
Go finish. Eric's going to have to Uber home if Eric's